The discovery of an affair is never simple, but sometimes it begins with the smallest, almost invisible signs. I still remember that evening as clearly as if it were painted across my eyelids. We were at a casual dinner with friends, nothing grand, just a gathering at a familiar restaurant in downtown Philadelphia. The kind of place where the light is warm, the chairs creak a little, and the wine flows more generously than it should. Ryan Hale. My husband, who had always been a man of reserved elegance, someone who carried himself with the quiet confidence of a rising professional, suddenly broke character. He leaned forward and one by one began serving food onto everyone's plates. It seemed like such a thoughtful gesture, yet it was uncharacteristic enough that it drew quick glances from the people around us. I noticed the way his friends exchanged fleeting looks, as though they knew something I didn't, as though they were silently acknowledging a secret that hung between them. Later that night, while clearing up, I passed by Ryan's study and heard him muttering under his breath, rehearsing a line from some movie he had once mentioned watching during a summer in Rome. His voice was soft, but clear enough for me to catch the words, "To hold your hand." I first held everyone else's. He chuckled to himself, but to me it landed like a cruel joke, a bitter irony that pressed against my chest. I walked away before he noticed me pretending not to have heard a thing. Yet the phrase clung to me like smoke. Ryan and I both came from nothing. That has always been the foundation of our story, the thread we believed would hold us together. We grew up in small, forgotten towns, the kind of places people leave behind the first chance they get. Through relentless effort bordering on sacrifice, we carved a way out. We were the children of modest parents, pushing through underfunded schools, surviving on ambition alone. By our early 20s, we had made it into respected universities, the kind of institutions our families had never even dreamed of. We completed graduate degrees, built reputations as diligent workers, and passed the civil service exams to become government employees. For years, we climbed rung by rung from the bottom up. We built our lives in Philadelphia with no family nearby, no one to lean on but each other. Each promotion felt like proof that our sacrifices had meaning. We eventually had title salaries that paid for a modest townhouse, a car that carried us through icy winters, and just enough financial stability to silence the constant fear of falling back into poverty. We had, by all accounts, achieved the American dream the hard way, without shortcuts, without cheating, and in a manner society silently applauds. This year was supposed to bring two blessings. The first came when Ryan was offered a leadership position at a private corporation, leaving behind the slow grind of public service for a paycheck that tripled overnight. The second came in the spring, when after 6 long years of waiting and endless disappointment, I finally became pregnant. Ryan's family carried a cruel inheritance, generations of men with low fertility. By 30, most had accepted childlessness as their fate. For us, conceiving had felt like another impossible mountain to climb. But against every odd, just as Ryan turned 30, our miracle arrived. I still remember the way he held me when we received the test results. This man who had always hidden his feelings so well collapsed against me in tears, clutching me like a boy who had just been handed his first real gift from life. It was the first time in years that I believed the world might be kind to us. In Philadelphia, we had built a small circle of friends. We gathered often, sharing meals, laughing about work, complaining about bosses. That night was no different. People toasted to Ryan's bright future, remarking how quickly he was climbing the ladder, how certain it seemed that bigger things awaited him. He only smiled modestly, as he always did. Ryan had always been admired for his writing, the kind of man who could pen an elegant speech that silenced a room. Yet as the compliments poured in, I caught the shift in the air, the way some faces stiffened, the way laughter turned uneasy. Among our circle was Michael Turner, an old acquaintance from Ryan's past. Once a contractor who made a decent living, Michael had gambled everything away. He lost his home, his credibility, and ended up blacklisted in business circles. Whenever he joined our dinners, he drank heavily, cursed the world, and turned every gathering sour. The last time he had even fought with someone so violently that the man spent weeks in the hospital. That evening, when people whispered about excluding him from future meetups, Ryan gently set down his tea and said, "He's my friend. Just because a man has fallen doesn't mean he ceases to be one." His tone was calm but firm. The others fell silent, some smiling awkwardly, conceding. I sat quietly troubled, not by loyalty, but by the fact that I was carrying a child and Michael was notorious for chain smoking. Every cigarette he lit felt like a threat drifting toward me, toward the small life I held inside me. When I tried to politely ask him not to smoke near me, he sneered, tossing back words like daggers, mocking me for being sensitive, treating me as though I were still the poor girl from nowhere. His disdain was heavy, his tone humiliating. I turned to Ryan for support, but when I glanced at him, his eyes were fixed on the door, his expression oddly expectant, as though he were waiting for someone to appear. A moment later, the door swung open with a violent push. I flinched at the noise. Michael stumbled in, already cursing about how much he had just been overcharged for parking outside. His anger spilled into the room like a storm. His voice crude, his fists clenched. Then he turned and shouted at the woman behind him. She followed in silence, her face lowered her shoulders, hunched as though she could fold into herself. The way she stepped inside made the whole room pause. There was something about the way Ryan's gaze softened almost imperceptibly as it landed on her. And in that instant, my world tilted. I didn't know her name yet. I didn't know her story. But I would learn soon enough. She was Chloe Bennett, and she was the beginning of the end. Chloe Bennett had the kind of face that seemed made for gentleness, soft lines, and quiet eyes that never challenged anyone. Yet that night when she stepped timidly into the room behind her husband, Michael Turner, there was a raw sting across her cheek, the faint trace of a slap, hastily concealed beneath a layer of powder. I saw it instantly, though she tried to hide it by tucking a strand of hair across her face. She moved as though the world itself pressed her down her steps, hesitant, her voice absent. And I thought how cruel fate was to have paired such a delicate, gracious woman with a man as volatile as Michael, whose temper could ignite a room in seconds. "Watch your mouth!" Ryan Hale snapped suddenly, his tone sharper than usual, filled with an irritation he barely contained. His rebuke cut through Michael's tirade. Michael froze for an instant, then like a man practiced in switching masks, broke into a grin that was all teeth and desperation. "Ryan, you're right. I'm sorry. I lost my temper again. I'll drink 3 glasses later to make it up, I swear." He laughed a sound as hollow as the promises that must have littered his marriage. Without waiting for acknowledgement, he dropped heavily into a chair, reaching greedily for peanuts as if he hadn't embarrassed himself moments before. Chloe lingered at the doorway, uncertain, almost shrinking from the space she was being forced to occupy. She brushed back that same lock of hair, eyes lowered, lips pressed into the faintest, most embarrassed smile. Around the table, people averted their gaze out of pity, as though by not meeting her eyes they could spare her dignity. I felt a sigh rise from my chest. "Chloe." "Come sit down," I said gently, offering her the kind of invitation she wasn't used to hearing. "Dinner's almost ready." She lifted her eyes, gratitude flashing for just a second, and managed a small smile. "Thank you, Rachel," she whispered, sliding into a seat beside her husband. But then her gaze drifted almost as if pulled by gravity toward Ryan. She let the words linger a second longer. "Thank you, Ryan." My husband stiffened beside me, just enough that I felt it like a current. He didn't answer. The meal stumbled forward, carried by the clink of glasses and Michael's rambling monologues. He cursed the government, cursed his bad luck, cursed the unfairness of a world that had chewed him up and spit him out. With each glass, his face grew redder, glossier, as though he were boiling from the inside out. Meanwhile, Chloe played her silent role, peeling shrimp, pouring his wine, tending to him, as if she had no hunger of her own. She barely touched her food. I opened my mouth to encourage her to eat, but my words died as I caught sight of Ryan. He leaned forward, chopsticks in hand, and placed a piece of fish onto the plate of Mr. Tan, the friend hosting the dinner. "You're the guest of honor tonight," Mr. Tan protested, laughing. "I should be serving you." "It's the same either way," Ryan replied in his even tone. Then, almost mechanically, he turned to the next person and placed a shrimp onto their plate. He moved down the line, serving each guest in turn, one after another, ladling soup, placing meat like some gracious host possessed by sudden generosity. The table buzzed with surprise. "What's gotten into Ryan tonight?" "Did the sun rise in the west?" one friend teased. Another chimed in, "Must be because Rachel's pregnant. He's overjoyed." The explanations seemed to satisfy them, laughter softening the strangeness. For me, though, the performance rang hollow. Ryan had always been stoic, almost unemotional. His sudden warmth, his uncharacteristic attentiveness, it was too rehearsed, too deliberate. Pregnancy was no small thing, especially for him, for his family. His parents back in the suburbs of Mainline were more ecstatic about the news than they had been when he first passed the bar exam, more relieved than when he landed his government job. For them, the continuation of the Hale name mattered above all. I told myself his behavior was nothing more than joy spilling over in an unfamiliar form. But then his eyes flickered upward across the table, landing on someone. I followed his gaze and felt the ground slip. There was Chloe Bennett, her head bowed, sipping her soup in quiet gulps. The light caught her lashes, damp and trembling. Her eyes rimmed with red. The bowl in front of her wasn't just soup. It was chicken broth, ladled out and placed before her by Ryan himself. I work in human resources. Observation is my profession, reading the subtle codes of body language, the unspoken hierarchies, the invisible currents between people. That is what I do. And in that moment, I understood. All the uncharacteristic generosity, the exaggerated performance of serving dish after dish, it had all been a pretense, a veil to hide the true recipient of his care. Every gesture had been a slow circle moving inevitably toward Chloe. When had Ryan begun to care for her this way? My mind raced back to 2 months earlier when Michael's father had died. Ryan, being from the same hometown, had joined them for the funeral. He had been gone 5 days traveling with Michael and Chloe. 5 days when I believed he was simply fulfilling an obligation of friendship. But now, seated across from them, watching the silent communion of glances and gestures, I felt the first tremor of suspicion. Still, suspicion is not proof. My work had taught me to separate intuition from evidence, and I reminded myself that Ryan had always been good to me. We had met back in college at the artificial lake on campus. He was always the first one there in the mornings, sitting on the stone benches with his textbooks open before the sun had fully risen. I was always the second. That's how our story began, two strivers from nowhere, drawn to the quiet grind of ambition. We had carried our small-town burdens like invisible weights, both of us desperate to validate the sacrifices of generations who had saved and scraped so that we could stand here. We ran so hard and so long, we forgot how to stop. And I thought I had found my companion in that endless race. I thought I had found the one person who understood the dark waters I swam through. The one who could remind me I wasn't alone. And I had believed, perhaps foolishly, that I was that for him too. So I said nothing. I smiled at the right moments. I lifted my glass when the toasts came. I kept my silence as the shadows gathered, as Ryan's hand brushed a bowl toward Chloe, as her eyes lingered too long on him. I said nothing, but silence has a way of sharpening itself, cutting deeper than words. That night, when Ryan Hale pulled me into his arms, there was a hunger in his eyes I had not seen in months. His breath was heavy against my neck, his body taut with an urgency I could not meet. I whispered softly, reminding him it had not yet been 3 months that the doctor had said we should wait. He exhaled frustration slipping through his clenched jaw, then sat up on the edge of the bed. "I'll take a cold shower," he muttered, and disappeared into the bathroom. I drifted towards sleep, but the sharp buzz of his phone woke me. His voice was urgent, low-laced with alarm. "Michael's drunk again. He's smashing things at home." My heart tightened with dread, but I asked half asleep, "Who called you?" "It was Chloe," he said, already pulling on his clothes. "She and the baby are both crying. It sounds serious." I glanced at the clock. "Past 11. Too late. Don't go." I urged. "If it's that bad, she can call the police. This isn't your responsibility. They're not family." But Ryan turned on me with a fury I had never seen. "Rachel, since when did you become so selfish?" His voice rose, cutting through the dark like a blade. I froze, stunned by the harshness in his eyes, the bitter edge in his tone. He pressed on each word a wound. "You live comfortably now, so you can ignore other people's suffering. You know Chloe's character. Do you think she would come to me if she had any other choice? Aren't you ashamed to be so cold to a friend?" For a moment, I didn't recognize the man before me. He looked at me as though I had betrayed something sacred. I could barely breathe. It had been years since I had shouted at anyone, colleagues, family, even Ryan. I had long understood that arguments never solved anything. They only stripped away reason and left raw emotion in their place. Anger, I knew, only consumed the person who carried it. I closed my eyes, steadied my voice, and said quietly, "This life I have now is the result of every step I've fought for. Why should I feel ashamed simply because someone else is unlucky?" Ryan stared at me with cold disdain, his face set like stone. "I'm going," he said finally, and he left. That night, I lay awake listening for the sound of his return. I didn't know when he came home, only that in the morning when I left for work, his shoes were tossed carelessly at the front door, and the spare bedroom door was shut tight. That day, I had an important evaluation meeting at the office one that would determine promotions across several departments. I couldn't let my emotions unravel. I buried the argument under layers of professionalism and walked into the boardroom with a steady smile. By the evening, the storm between us seemed to have passed. When I returned home, the dining table was set with steaming dishes, a bowl of fresh fruit, and even a small birthday cake. Ryan emerged from the kitchen with a bowl of soup in his hands, smiling as though nothing had happened. "Perfect timing," he said. "Wash up. Dinner's ready. I made your favorite braised fish." I set my bag down, slowly lifted my head, and returned his smile. "Happy birthday," I said softly. He laughed, his dimples flashing. 31. Guess I'm officially an old man now." We ate together, our words. Light laughter filling the silence where tension had lived the night before. At one point, Ryan mentioned casually, "I went over to Michael's, gave him a lesson he won't forget, then came straight back. I didn't want to wake you, so I slept in the other room." I nodded, saying nothing. Later, as we cleared the table, I paused and said, "I've been struggling to sleep lately. Maybe you should stay in the guest room for a while." He hesitated just for a second, then said, "All right." For a time, life between us returned to its careful rhythm. I threw myself into recruitment and training at work, while Ryan poured his energy into a new project his company had just launched. To anyone watching, we were the picture of stability, of logic, and compromise. I told myself that was the advantage of marrying a rational man. We always measured before acting, always suppressed emotion beneath reason. But soon I would learn how wrong I was. One afternoon, my younger brother Kevin Scott called me out of the blue. 6 years younger, freshly graduated with a master's degree, he was anxious about finding his place in the world. At first, he rambled about trivial things, his classes, the job market, friends who had moved away. Then his voice faltered. "Rachel," he asked hesitantly, "are you and Ryan okay?" The question startled me. "What do you mean?" "Kevin, just say it." He hesitated again before blurting out the truth. Kevin had majored in materials engineering, a field Ryan's company specialized in. For years, Ryan's firm had recruited top students from Kevin's program, often giving them positions right out of school. Kevin had applied along with 7 of his classmates. Every one of them had been accepted except him. The reason they gave Kevin, said quietly, was that upper management didn't approve my application. "Rachel, do you think Ryan had anything to do with that?" My hand tightened around the phone. A slow, cold anger crept into my chest. Kevin wasn't just any student. He was brilliant, dedicated, the kind of hire any company should want. There was no logical reason to single him out, unless someone had made it personal. I steadied my voice, told Kevin I would look into it, and hung up. Then I dialed Ryan's number, my pulse pounding. The call rang once, twice, 3 times. He didn't answer. 10 minutes later, Ryan called me back. I didn't bother with pleasantries. The words tumbled out sharp and direct. "Tell me, Ryan, what was wrong with Kevin's application. Was there something that made him unqualified for your company?" On the other end, there was silence, 2 long seconds, where I could hear only his breathing. Finally, his voice came deliberate and calm. "Rachel, there was nothing wrong with him." My chest tightened. Then why was he rejected? Ryan sighed as though preparing to deliver a verdict he hoped I would accept. The leadership decided to prioritize candidates with more social experience this year, so they cut one slot. To avoid conflict, I suggested Kevin's name be removed. Think about it. I've only just taken this position. If my brother-in-law joins right after, people will say I abused my power. Rachel, you have to understand. I felt the ice spread through me. Understand. My voice was steady, but it carried the sharpness of glass. Kevin chose this field years before you ever transferred into it. Even if you weren't managing recruitment, he would have been accepted on merit. There was no nepotism. And as for this so-called directive from leadership, you're the vice president in charge of recruitment, Ryan. If anyone set that directive, it was you. There was another silence, shorter this time, followed by his voice turning cold. Rachel, you work in HR too. I didn't expect you to be so naive. What's done is done. Making a scene won't change it. And then the line went dead. I doubled over, clutching my stomach as a wave of pain tore through me. It wasn't just physical, it was grief, guilt, rage, all colliding at once. Kevin had dreamed of this path since he was admitted to college. He had studied relentlessly, shaping his future around one goal: to work at a company like Ryan's. And I, his sister, instead of helping him reach that dream, had become the obstacle standing in his way. Tears blurred my vision, but there was no release in them. Ryan and I entered a silent war after that night. It wasn't the petty sulking of minor disputes. He became unyielding in a way that shocked me. He ignored my emotions entirely, disregarding the fact that I was carrying his child, showing no sign of compromise or tenderness. Oddly, it was Kevin who comforted me. Don't blame him too much, Rachel, he said gently. When I tried to apologize, he just started that job. It must be awkward. I'll find another company. Maybe this is a chance to learn more, get stronger. Don't worry about me. His resilience should have lightened my burden, but instead it deepened my shame. 2 days later, I went out to dinner with colleagues. I wasn't expecting to see Chloe Bennett there, sitting at a long table with a group of men and women speaking in the warm drawl of her hometown. She spotted me across the room, her face lighting up with an almost shy smile. Tugging the arm of a man beside her, she approached. What a coincidence! Rachel, she said sweetly, as though the tension between us had never existed. I forced a polite smile. Yes, quite the coincidence. The man with her stepped forward, eagerly extending his hand. I've heard about you, he said. Chloe told me you're married to Vice President Hale. I just wanted to introduce myself. It's an honor. I kept my tone neutral. And you are... new hire, he said brightly. Still an intern, actually. Honestly, I wouldn't even be here if not for Mr. Hale. Normally, the company never hires outside fresh graduates, but thanks to Chloe's recommendation, I got a chance. I owe her everything. I lowered my eyes, staring at the table as though it might swallow me whole. My chest burned with an anger I dared not show. Chloe's voice cut in light and practiced. Next time Michael has a free evening, we'd love to invite you and Ryan to dinner. The 4 of us together. It would be nice, don't you think? The soup in front of me had formed a greasy white film, congealed and heavy. I lifted my head, forced a smile, and said, Of course, that would be fine. Later that night, Ryan came home close to 10. I was propped against the headboard, reading a book chosen for a work assignment. Without a word, he set a thick envelope of cash on the nightstand. "Kevin just graduated," he said. "He'll need to rent a place. Give him $5,000 from me. Consider it a gift from his brother-in-law." I closed the book slowly and looked at the money. My voice was calm flat. "That won't be necessary." His brows knit together. After a pause, he pressed again, his tone strained but controlled. "Rachel, are you still upset about the interview? You know I have a little authority now, and that's why I have to be careful. Every step I take is watched. Why can't you try to understand?" I set the book aside, meeting his eyes without flinching. When I told Ryan there was no need to give Kevin money for rent because he had already bought a condo, his face changed instantly. Shock rippled across his features. He bought a place with what money he demanded. "Your parents live off their pensions, Rachel. They've always counted on Kevin to ease the burden after graduation. How could he possibly afford a down payment?" I lifted my head slowly and looked straight at him. He instinctively met my eyes, but something in my gaze unsettled him. He shifted, clearing his throat, then tried to recover. "He has a master's degree. Even if he didn't get into my company, he won't have trouble finding work. He'll be fine." Then his tone softened, sliding into persuasion. "Rachel, we're husband and wife. We're supposed to be closer than anyone else in this world. You're pregnant now. Don't let something this small become a reason to stay angry with me. Just take the money to him. Where else would he get enough for a condo?" I pressed my palm against my belly and answered evenly. "He didn't have it before, but I lent him $30,000. The housing market dropped, so with that, he could put a down payment on a small older place." Ryan's eyes widened. His voice cracked in disbelief. "You? What? You decided something that big without telling me, and now you're only mentioning it." I leaned back against the headboard, calm and deliberate. "Lent Ryan." I said lent, not gave. "And tell me, how is this any different from 2 years ago, when your sister divorced and you wired her $30,000 for her own place without saying a word until after the transfer went through? Then you told me I had no right to be upset because family comes first. How is this different?" His jaw tightened, his expression darkening. "That's not the same." "Why not?" I countered. "Your sister was thrown out of her home and needed shelter. You didn't hesitate. Kevin is younger, yes, but he just lost a chance he had worked years for, and now he needs stability more than ever. I am asking you for the same compassion you showed her." My words hung in the air. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it, unable to answer. I continued my tone unwavering. "If Kevin had been hired at your firm, he would have lived in company housing and wouldn't need to buy right away. But you shut that door. Now he has to plan differently. I already gave him the money, and I am telling you now because I want your understanding, not your permission." He stood there, frozen lips parting as if to argue, but nothing came out. I pressed once more. "Ryan, you could extend sympathy to your sister. Why can't you extend it to my brother? Or do you believe that in this house, I don't have the right to make decisions for my own family?" Silence filled the bedroom, thick and suffocating. We had been together for 9 years, 3 dating, 6 married. I knew him too well. His nature was to flare with emotion when caught off guard, but his training and ambition had shaped him into a man who could compose himself quickly, weighing logic over impulse. He would always return to control. At last, Ryan's face smoothed into an expression of benevolence. A smile practiced and placating curved his lips. "Of course, Rachel. You're my wife. You have every right to decide things in this home. Kevin is your brother. He's family. Helping him is what we should do." His words were generous, his tone warm, but I knew better than to mistake that calm for genuine agreement. Still, I returned his smile soft and gentle. "Good. I'm tired tonight. I'd like to sleep early." "You should rest too." He turned and walked toward the door. But at the threshold, he paused, looking back with a measured expression. "One more thing. Michael and Chloe invited us to dinner. If you don't want to go, I'll go alone." I didn't hesitate. "I'll go." The dinner was held at their townhouse in West Philadelphia. When Ryan and I arrived, Michael was outside on the balcony, hunched over his phone, speaking in hurried, deferential tones. It was clear from the look on his face that someone was pressing him about money. Their son, a boy of 9, answered the door. He barely looked at us, muttered a greeting, and retreated inside with the phone still clutched in his hand, his expression detached and far too cold for a child. When Michael finally noticed us, he hurried inside, his words tumbling out in loud scolding aimed straight at Chloe. She had just stepped from the kitchen carrying a steaming bowl of soup. "Can't you do anything right?" he barked. "Guests arrive and you don't even greet them." "Useless." Startled, Chloe's hands trembled. The soup sloshed, spilling across the back of her hand, scalding the skin red within seconds. She gasped, but forced a smile, lips trembling. Ryan set the gift box on the table with a loud thud. His voice was sharp, uncharacteristically stern. "Enough, Michael. I came here for dinner, not to watch you berate your wife." The room froze. Chloe lowered her head, biting her lip, forcing another fragile smile, as though nothing had happened, as though humiliation wasn't burning her from the inside out. I sat down quietly, my eyes lingering on her injured hand, on the way she tucked it behind her back, as though hiding her pain could erase it. Something twisted in my chest, part pity, part unease. Ryan's gaze flicked toward her, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. I recognized it instantly, the same look he used to give me back when all his tenderness was mine alone. And in that instant, sitting at a dinner table thick with tension, I understood something terrifying. I was no longer the only woman he wanted to protect. "It's fine," Chloe said softly, lowering her gaze as Michael's voice boomed. "He's in a bad mood. Let him vent. It doesn't cost me anything to take it." Ryan's eyes darkened as he stared at her reddened hand. I noticed it too, how his expression lingered on the burn, as though it struck something deeper inside him. I had never seen him look at another woman that way. Chloe moved through the kitchen, busy and graceful, balancing dish after dish, as if it were nothing. She filled the table with food she had prepared alone, carrying herself with the practiced smile of a woman who knew how to keep peace. Over dinner, Ryan's restraint broke. He turned to Michael, voice edged with anger. "She serves you day and night, and you don't appreciate her. You lay a hand on her again, and that's domestic violence. She could take you to court, do you understand?" Michael, already half drunk, nodded clumsily. Chloe gave a small laugh, brushing off the accusation. "Oh, it's nothing. Men work hard outside. The pressure gets to them. Sometimes they can't control themselves. Better he releases his temper at home than in public. As long as I take care of him, well, life will be peaceful." My spoon clattered against the bowl. I froze, unable to believe what I had heard. My stomach twisted. A woman excusing her husband's fists as if they were an unavoidable part of marriage. How could she say it so lightly? From beside me came the faint sound of a sigh, Ryan's sigh. There was something in it, sadness, maybe even tenderness, that made me glance at him quickly. His eyes were on Chloe again, soft and almost moved. Michael. His face flushed red from liquor, leaned against Ryan, his words slurring. Brother, my wife might not be as polished as Rachel, but when it comes to serving a man, she beats her by miles. And in bed. Enough! Ryan's voice thundered, cutting him off. The room fell silent. Chloe's cheeks flushed scarlet, her shame written in every trembling line of her body. She darted a glance at Ryan, then quickly looked away, fumbling to change the subject. Ryan, please try the ribs I made. Do they taste all right? Oh, and about my cousin who just joined the company. I need to thank you again. If it weren't for... You're mistaken. Ryan snapped, his voice sharper than I had ever heard it. I don't know your cousin. You must be confused. His face hardened, shutting the conversation down with brutal finality. Chloe stared at him, bewildered, her lips parting, but no words coming out. The room plunged into silence. I broke it with a laugh, low and cutting. Chloe, you shouldn't just thank Ryan. You should thank me too. After all, the only reason there was an opening for your cousin was because Ryan crossed Kevin off the list. Her eyes widened in shock. Ryan's chopsticks froze midair. The rest of the meal passed without words. On the drive home, the silence between us grew thick, pressing against the windows until it felt suffocating. I didn't speak. Neither did he. When we reached home, I went straight to the bedroom, pulled out my suitcase, and began folding clothes with steady hands. Ryan followed after a while, his steps heavy, his presence filling the doorway. Rachel, he began. Voice low, careful. There's a misunderstanding here. Please don't rush into anger. Let me explain. I swear to you, what I'm about to say is the truth. I didn't answer. I didn't even look up. I just kept folding one shirt after another. He took a breath and went on. About Kevin. I admit I acted with self-interest. I had just taken the position. Everyone's eyes were on me. If I had approved him, people would whisper about nepotism. Maybe those who know us would understand, but outsiders, they'd only see the result. They'd gossip, they'd undermine me. I had to shut it down before it started. He paused, his tone faltering, then steadied again. As for Chloe's cousin, that was just chance. There was a slot left open. I thought helping her would be harmless. Yes, many wanted it, but I agreed because I pitied her. Rachel, when I visited her hometown with them, I saw it with my own eyes, her mother-in-law cursing her, Michael striking her, humiliating her in front of everyone. It reminded me of my sister. That's why I said yes. I zipped the suitcase closed, ready to drag it toward the door. Ryan lunged forward, his hand closing around my wrist. His grip was firm, desperate. Rachel, please, don't do this. I admit it, I wronged Kevin. I made him pay for my caution, but when you lent him the money, I didn't oppose it. I didn't stop you. I accepted it because I knew he deserved it. His voice cracked, his eyes red. We've been together for years. You're carrying my child. Will you sentence me to death over this mistake? Over pity I showed for another woman's suffering. I pulled my wrist free, my voice calm. Detached, a still surface hiding storms beneath. I'm leaving for training. His eyes searched mine, bloodshot. straining to read the truth in my expression. His lips parted, but no words came. For the first time in years, Ryan Hale looked like a man afraid of losing everything, and I felt nothing but emptiness as I turned away. Training Ryan's voice was laced with disbelief. "You never mentioned anything about this." I lowered my eyes, pulled out my phone, and handed it to him. On the screen was the official notice of 4-day executive management workshop hosted by our old university. He froze, staring at it for a few seconds. "Didn't you tell me you wouldn't attend any programs while pregnant? Why suddenly change your mind?" "People change their minds," I said quietly. My tone flat, my expression unreadable. "I want to go now." The conversation ended there. I packed, drove myself to the university's conference hotel, and checked in. For 4 days, my life belonged to the workshop, not to him. On the first day, Ryan called relentlessly. He followed with a dozen messages, one after another, urging me to eat, to rest, to answer him. I ignored them all. The second day, his messages turned practical. He wrote that Kevin had bought a place, but still needed money to renovate, and by chance Ryan had just received a $50,000 quarterly bonus. He said he'd transferred it all to Kevin. Still, I stayed silent. On the third day, his tone shifted again. He informed me that Chloe's cousin hadn't passed the internship evaluation and had been removed from the program. The company was already looking for a replacement. On the fourth day, his message was simple. "Do you need me to pick you up?" I finally answered with one word: yes. When Kevin officially started work, he came to see me. We had always been close bound, not just by blood, but by memories. I remembered him at 5 or 6 years old, rushing in front of me when older kids bullied me. His eyes brimming with tears as he shouted, "Rachel, run!" He had always tried to shield me even when he was too small to do so. This time, his eyes carried the same anxious protectiveness. "Rachel, did you and Ryan fight?" I smiled faintly. "No, you know me. I've never been good at fighting." He frowned. "Then why did he suddenly change his mind and give me money?" "It doesn't feel right. If it causes problems between you two, I'd rather give up the job." I touched his shoulder and smiled gently. "Don't be silly. That letter of employment was yours by right. Things are just being set back on track. The money is compensation, nothing more. Perfectly reasonable." Kevin nodded firmly. "I'll pay every cent back. No one will ever say my sister raised me by selling herself short." I laughed, shaking my head. "Tell me how you did it." Ryan isn't a man who changes his mind easily. He hesitated, then grinned. "There's more than one way to solve a problem. You don't need to make a scene. Black cat or white cat. It doesn't matter as long as it catches the mouse." Life settled after that. A month passed without obvious change. Ryan and I never truly fought. Our conflicts were quiet, woven into silence, hidden beneath the daily rhythm of marriage. Problems appeared silently and just as silently disappeared. Ryan began limiting contact with Michael and Chloe. It was as if he had cut the cord, cleanly removing them from our lives without a trace. At home, he was punctual, attentive. He took meticulous care of me through my pregnancy. Once I passed the fragile first trimester, my appetite returned. He recorded my meals in a small notebook, listing which foods were safe, which should be avoided. He hovered gentle and cautious as though building a fortress around me. From the outside, we looked like the picture of stability. But two small things unsettled me. The first was the receipt I found in his coat pocket, a slip from a jewelry store downtown, totaling $28,888. My hands trembled as I held it. I went to the store. The saleswoman smiled warmly when I showed her the receipt. She pulled up the order and handed me a photo of the item, a gold bracelet. "Your husband is wonderful," she said, her tone conspiratorial. "He told us it was a surprise for his wife. You're very lucky." I smiled back, but my heart felt heavy. The second incident came the following week. My car had broken down, so Ryan drove me to work each morning. That Thursday, it rained hard sheets of water blurring the streets. I waited at the intersection we had agreed on umbrella, useless against the wind. 40 minutes passed. My calls went unanswered, the line constantly busy. By the time his car finally pulled up, I was drenched to the bone. "Why didn't you call a cab?" he scolded. Brows furrowed as he reached to crank up the heater. "Call one in that storm." I snapped, my teeth chattering as I wrapped my arms around myself. "Do you think cabs fall from the sky in weather like this?" The words slipped out sharper than I intended, but I didn't take them back. My body was wet and cold, but my heart colder still. He said his boss had called unexpectedly, keeping him tied to the phone. He sounded frustrated, maybe even genuine. But the constant busy signal, the 40 minutes in the storm, the receipt in his coat pocket, each small detail stacked against the others until doubt began to carve deep fissures inside me. Ryan Hale was careful, considerate, and outwardly devoted. But was he still mine, or had his tenderness already shifted elsewhere? The next morning, I stopped by my best friend's bakery to pick up a few pastries. She greeted me warmly, but as she rang up my order, she said something that made my stomach drop. "Rachel, wasn't that Ryan's car parked outside here during that storm the other day? It sat there for nearly an hour. I thought it was empty, but then the engine started and it drove off. Guess he'd been inside the whole time on the phone." My hand froze on the counter. "Are you sure? Do you remember what time it was?" She tilted her head, thinking. "Around 5, maybe 6 in the evening." I turned toward the window, staring at the corner where her bakery sat. From there to the intersection where I had waited in the downpour was only one turn. Just one. 40 minutes. I had stood in the storm rain, soaking through my clothes until my skin burned with cold, while Ryan sat a block away in his warm car, too consumed by his call to drive the extra 30 seconds to me. Later that night, I passed his study door and heard the faint sound of a movie playing. He was mouthing lines along with the dialogue, his eyes narrowed, his expressions strangely complicated. Was it nostalgia, longing, or something else I couldn't name? The memory tangled with another, the last day of training at my old university. I had wandered alone to the man-made lake on campus, watching the sunlight ripple over the surface. For a long time, I paced along the shore, hesitating, torn by thoughts I could not name. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. "Rachel." She said, her voice gentle but weary. "My legs are weak these days. I can't help much. You're carrying a child now, so you must stay cheerful. Eat well. Do everything for the baby. Understand?" When she hung up, another call came immediately, my mother-in-law. "Rachel, you need more nourishment. Ryan's father and I will come for a few days to help. Tell me what you want to eat so I can prepare." At the same time, Ryan texted, "Do you want me to come pick you up?" I scrolled through his earlier messages, feeling the weight of them, then placed my hand on my belly. Before leaving the lake, I answered, yes. Ryan had many strengths. Intelligent, hardworking, persistent. Above all, he was ambitious, and ambition had always mattered to me. His flaws, selfishness, impatience, quick temper, I had once dismissed as ordinary human weaknesses, manageable with time and effort. But standing at that lake, I realized circumstances had changed. He was no longer the man struggling upward. He was a man who had reached a place of power, and new environments brought new problems. Problems that demanded solutions I wasn't sure he knew how to give. I never imagined the turning point of our lives would arrive so violently, so mercilessly, without warning. It happened the day before I retrieved my car. I had attended a meeting at the Women's Association in the city. The meeting ended early and I hailed a taxi to return home. We were on the highway when a truck slammed into us from behind. The impact was brutal. The taxi flipped several times, then crashed against a concrete pillar with a sound that tore through bone, and metal alike. My vision blurred. As consciousness slipped away, I saw the driver struggling to crawl free. Time lost meaning. Somewhere in the haze, I heard horns blaring, people shouting. My eyes fluttered open, catching glimpses of mangled cars strewn across the road. It was a pile-up chaos everywhere. But the taxi. My taxi was crushed worst of all. Pain spread from my abdomen, deep and consuming. Panic surged. Then cutting through the chaos came the wail of sirens. Ambulances pierced the rain lights, flashing tires screeching. Through the shattered glass of the window, I saw the driver pointing toward me, shouting something I couldn't hear. Paramedics ran toward us. Relief filled me for a brief second until I saw Ryan. He stood in front of them, blocking their path, his voice commanding, almost desperate. "Save the child first, please. Save the child first." Behind him was Chloe, pale and trembling, clutching her son in her arms. The boy's leg was slick with blood, crimson staining his small pants. He wailed in terror as Chloe held him tight. I tried to cry out, but darkness pulled me under again. When I awoke, I was in a hospital bed. A doctor smiled gently down at me. "You're lucky. The seatbelt kept you safe. Just some minor injuries on your forehead. You'll be all right." My hand shot to my belly. "And the baby's stable," the doctor assured me. "No serious issues, but we'll monitor closely for a few days." Relief hit me, but it didn't last. My next question tumbled out shaky. "The others, from the accident, were they brought here too?" "Yes," the doctor nodded. As soon as he left, I climbed out of bed, moving down the hallway, searching room by room until I reached the far corner. And there, in the quietest ward of all, I found the person I had been looking for. Little Theo lay asleep on the hospital bed, one small leg encased in plaster. His face was calm, almost angelic in sleep, while Chloe sat beside him, wiping her eyes with a crumpled tissue. She looked fragile, pitiful in a way that drew sympathy easily. "Ryan," she whispered through quiet sobs. "If it hadn't been for you today, I don't know what I would have done." Ryan stood a few feet away, his expression unreadable. His hand lifted slightly as if to comfort her, but stopped midway, hovering awkwardly in the air. When their eyes met Chloe's, cheeks flushed pink. She lowered her head, her voice trembling soft as the faintest breeze. "You've been so good to me. I would give myself willingly if it meant I could keep your kindness." Ryan pressed his lips together, silent for a long moment. Finally, he forced composure into his tone. "Don't say that. We're friends. Friends help each other." Chloe's head dipped lower, exposing the pale curve of her neck. Her voice trickled out sweet and plaintive. "No one has ever treated me this well. I never believed it when I asked if you could help my cousin and you said yes. You even sacrificed your sister-in-law's brother for me. I know I shouldn't have asked, but I was so touched." Her words cut through me like shards of glass. And that stormy night she went on her tears, slipping freely now, I was terrified. "I called you and you didn't leave. You just sat with me in the car for an hour. Today when disaster struck, I didn't know who else to call. But you came right away. Ryan. Since I was a child, I was never valued. As an adult, I've been beaten and humiliated by my husband. This is the first time in my life I've felt protected by a man." She reached out, took his hand, and pressed it against her damp cheek. Ryan didn't pull away. "Ryan," she murmured, her face hot with shame. I still remember that night we drove back from Michael's parents' house. He was passed out in the front seat, and the luggage had us trapped in the back, pressed so close together. "I only had to glance once to know you were struggling. I knew your wife was pregnant, that you hadn't been close for a long time. So I used my hand." Ryan's jaw clenched, his voice low and hoarse. "I remember. The night was pitch black, but your hand was so pale. I had never seen hands that white." Her blush deepened, her head bowing further. Her words softened, melting into the room like water. "It was only once. I didn't expect you to treat me so well after. I feel guilty, but grateful." Ryan's eyes darkened, his silence heavier than stone. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "Once." But it meant more than many times over. Those words were enough. I had heard enough. A decision settled inside me like iron. At that same hospital, the obstetrician was an old acquaintance of mine. When Ryan's parents rushed in from the train station after hearing of my accident, I had just been wheeled back from surgery. Seeing me pale and frail on the bed, my mother-in-law seized my hand, her voice shaking. "Rachel, tell me the baby's all right. Please tell me the baby's all right." Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "No, the baby's gone." The doctor said if I had been brought in just 5 minutes earlier, maybe there would have been a chance. But the ambulance was delayed. Someone stopped it. They stole that time, and with it, they stole my child's life. My father-in-law's face turned red with rage. He roared, voice shaking the walls. Who killed my grandchild? I'll make them pay with their life." My strength broke grief, flooding me, until darkness claimed me again. Later, a nurse told me what had happened. Ryan's parents, after learning the truth, had stormed down the corridor into Chloe's room. Ryan wasn't there. He had gone out to buy food for her and Theo. When he returned a bag of steaming buns in his hands, he walked straight into chaos. His parents had Chloe pinned to the floor, striking her again and again. Her face was swollen, bloodied, her cries reduced to broken gasps. Nurses tried to intervene but couldn't pry them off. Because of this woman, his mother screamed, clawing at Chloe's hair. "Because of her child, the ambulance never reached your wife. Our grandchild is gone." Ryan froze in the doorway, the buns tumbling from his hands, scattering across the floor. The hot steam escaped in bursts, filling the sterile air with the scent of dough and pork. By then, while I still lay unconscious in my room, his parents had pieced the truth together. They knew. They knew it was Chloe Bennett's son, Ryan's godson in name, but in reality, his blood that had stolen the ambulance meant for me. and they knew it was Ryan Hale who had made the call that cost me my child. Ryan's parents had struck him hard again and again, before collapsing against the wall, crying out to heaven that everything was fate. In their anguish, they swore to one another that I must never know the truth. They knew if I discovered it, I would never forgive their son. So when I finally opened my eyes, what I saw was Ryan sitting by my bedside with his face buried in his hands. His shoulders shook, his eyes red and swollen, his voice raw as he whispered, "Rachel, I failed you. I couldn't protect our baby." He wept quietly, the tears falling one by one, burning as if they carried fire. I stayed in the hospital for several more days before being sent home to recover. His parents arrived with cautious hope, but when they left, it was as if they had carried away the greatest sorrow of their lives. Before departing, my mother-in-law clasped my hand, her eyes filled with grief. "Rachel," she whispered, "if our family truly has no fate with children, then perhaps we must accept it. But you have borne too much." In the weeks that followed, Ryan cared for me as though I were a new mother in confinement. Once a man too consumed by work to sit down for a proper meal, he now spent every spare moment tending to me. He cooked, cleaned, stayed by my side, even more attentive than a nurse. I lay in bed much of the time eating the nourishing soups he prepared, reading through collections of essays that spoke of perseverance and resilience. I regained strength while he grew thinner by the day. His colleagues and women from the city association visited often. Because the accident had occurred during an official meeting, it was recognized as a workplace incident. The director of my department, a kind and dignified woman, came herself. She stood by my bed, her voice gentle. "Rachel, don't worry about work. Everyone knows your dedication. This year, during our review, you received more votes for commendation than anyone. Focus on healing." Tears stung my eyes. "Thank you, Director. Thank you, everyone. I promise I'll work even harder in the future." She smiled, patting my hand. "Take care of yourself. There will be many more opportunities for you to shine." When the visitors left, I lay back, closing my eyes, my thoughts drifting. Soon, Ryan entered the room, his voice soft. "Rachel, what kind of soup would you like today?" I looked at him for a moment before answering. "Ribs with lotus root." "All right," he said, nodding quickly. "I'll go to the market and get the freshest ingredients." I watched his back as he disappeared through the door, then turned to the book on my nightstand. My fingers brushed the notes scrawled in the margins. Turn obstacles into opportunities. Transform adversity into strength. Never stop moving forward. When my health had mostly returned, Michael and Chloe came to visit. I greeted them with warm politeness, though inside my heart was steel. Chloe could barely meet my gaze, her eyes darting away whenever I looked at her. While she spoke in hushed tones, my attention slid to her wrist. "Chloe," I said with a smile, "that gold bracelet looks beautiful." "Must have cost quite a bit." Michael scoffed loudly. "Buy real gold." "That's a fake she picked up on the street. Probably cost a few bucks." Chloe nodded quickly, panic flickering across her face. Yes, just a cheap one. I thought it was pretty, that's all." I chuckled lightly, pulling out my phone. Funny, because I happened to find a receipt in Ryan's coat the other day. I swiped through until the picture appeared, then held it out. Here it is, $28,888. He bought a bracelet just like yours, said it was meant to be a surprise for me. If I hadn't stumbled across the receipt, I'd never have known. Michael's eyes lit up. Really? That's real. How much did you say again? I smiled sweetly. Nearly 30,000. But don't mention it, all right? He hasn't given it to me yet. My words trailed off, my expression shifting as a realization hit me. I turned my gaze deliberately to Chloe's wrist. Strange, isn't it? The design is identical. Michael leaned closer, squinting at her bracelet, then at the photo on my phone. You're right. Exactly the same. Chloe forced a brittle laugh. Probably just a copy. You know how knockoffs mimic the originals these days. I smiled faintly, my voice calm but sharp. True, no way you'd get an authentic piece like that from a street vendor. Michael frowned, his brows knitting, as his eyes flicked between the bracelet and my phone. I pretended not to notice, chatting idly about nothing of importance. Chloe, it's rare for me to have visitors. I've been cooped up too long. I'm glad you came. Her face stiffened, her fingers twitching, as she tried to hide the bracelet beneath her sleeve. I kept smiling, though, inside the certainty solidified like ice. Ryan Hale's secret shimmered in the light wrapped around Chloe Bennett's wrist. Do you remember that couple who lived across from us? I asked one afternoon, my tone casual though my eyes were fixed on Chloe. They just sold their house and moved away. She blinked, feigning curiosity. Really? Why I sighed, letting the pause linger. Because the husband was caught cheating with another man's wife. They were caught in the act. In the end, they had to pay so much money to smooth things over, they sold the house just to cover it. Michael sat stiff and silent, saying nothing, his face unreadable. As the weeks passed and I returned to work, Ryan began to look increasingly hollowed out. Losing the baby had gutted him. In front of me, he forced a smile, but when he thought I wasn't watching, his eyes were vacant, staring into nothing. He looked like a man whose soul had slipped away. Michael started inviting him out for drinks more often. At first, Ryan refused, worried I would be upset. But I saw the weight on him, and I softened. Go. I told him gently, you need the company. We're both tired. Talking with a friend will do you good. His eyes glistened with emotion. He grasped my hand. Rachel medicine is advanced now. Once you're stronger, we'll have another chance. We'll have a child. I nodded calmly. Yes, we'll have a child. Maybe he was lying, but I was not. The doctor had been clear, my body had healed well. My ability to conceive was untouched. What I had lost was devastating, but I refused to tie my life forever to a man who betrayed me. I would not raise a child in a broken home, nor risk pouring my bitterness onto an innocent soul. My director kept her word. Once I returned, she placed greater trust in me, giving me important projects. In the workplace, women bore heavier burdens than men, but I worked harder, proving myself every step of the way. My career became my anchor. One evening, as I was about to sleep, Ryan came in looking uneasy. Michael got drunk again. He's beating Chloe. They both called me. Rachel, if you need me here, I'll stay. But I sat up straight, my voice firm. Go. Quickly. If something happens to her, it will be worse. Hours later, deep in the night, a noise woke me. I padded out to the living room only to find Michael sprawled arrogantly on my couch legs, crossed, his expression smug. Go back to sleep, sister-in-law, he said casually. I just came with Ryan to grab a few things. I'll leave soon. His tone was careless, insolent. Confused, I went toward the study. Just as I reached the door, Ryan emerged, his hair disheveled, clothes rumpled, a red handprint burning across his cheek. Ryan, what happened? He startled, hands trembling so badly that the wad of cash he carried spilled across the floor. "It's nothing. I hit a street vendor's cart with the car, so I'm giving Michael money to cover the damages." "Don't worry." Michael sauntered out, snatching up the cash. His eyes flicked toward Ryan with a mocking glint. He twirled his phone in his hand and smirked. "This will do for now. If it's not enough, I'll be in touch." Ryan's jaw twitched. "Go," he muttered. When they left, both insisting it was nothing, I forced myself back to bed, though unease gnawed at me. Months passed. I focused on my work, rebuilding my strength, regaining my sense of self. Then one afternoon, while presenting a report to leadership, my phone buzzed. The police were calling. They asked me to come to the station, offering no explanation. My director, alarmed, sent a union representative to accompany me. At the precinct, the officer looked at me gravely. "Mrs. Hale, your husband was involved in a fight." He severed another man's ear. My blood ran cold. Who was hurt?" The officer repeated, steady and unflinching. "It was Michael Turner. Your husband cut off his ear." The words felt unreal. My voice cracked. "No, tell me exactly what happened." The officer sighed and began. That night, 6 months earlier, when Michael beat Chloe, Ryan had gone to intervene. Afterward, the two men drank heavily, and Ryan stayed over. In the middle of the night, Michael woke to strange sounds coming from his bedroom. He stormed in and found Ryan with Chloe. Michael went berserk, dragging Ryan off, her beating him mercilessly. To silence Michael, Ryan promised him money. That was why later that night they had come to our house together. Ryan handed over the cash in secret, but Michael was drowning in debt. One payoff was never enough. He had recorded everything on his phone and spent the next 6 months blackmailing Ryan, squeezing him for more, nearly $180,000 in total. I shook my head in disbelief. That's impossible! Where would he even get that kind of money? But even as I said it, the image of cash slipping from Ryan's trembling hands flashed before my eyes, and the hollow look he had worn for months finally made sense. Ryan Hale. My husband had not only betrayed me, but had been bleeding himself dry to feed Michael's greed until the night it exploded into violence. The officer explained that Ryan had borrowed more than $1 million from online lenders. When Michael pressed him again for another $500,000, Ryan finally snapped. Cornered and desperate, he grabbed a kitchen knife and sliced off Michael's ear. I sat frozen numb, unable to speak. The union representative who had accompanied me placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, his voice low with sympathy. "Rachel, you just need to endure this storm. It will pass." Michael was charged with large-scale extortion and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Ryan was expelled from government service for gross misconduct and given a 1-year prison sentence for intentional assault. I filed for divorce while he was still behind bars. The debts he had taken on in secret did not involve me legally, so I bore no financial responsibility. Still, the weight of betrayal pressed on me like a stone. The day we signed the papers was the first time I had seen him in months. He was shockingly gaunt, almost unrecognizable. I had imagined anger tears pleading, but there was none of that. He sat silently, his face ashen, his eyes empty, his body trembling. When he finally raised his head to look at me, his whole frame quivered. Then he bent forward in a deep, unnatural bow, as though trying to fold himself in half, shaking the entire time. I watched him without expression, my gaze flat and cold like the surface of a still lake. As I turned to leave, his voice broke through the silence. "Rachel!" I stopped. He lifted his head, his eyes clouded and lost. "Rachel, tell me, why is fate so strange? Just a short time ago, I stood at the peak. I had everything. And now look at me. How could it all vanish in an instant?" I stared at him without blinking, my voice calm, almost clinical. "Ryan, you forgot who you were. You forgot the path you once fought so hard to walk. Step by step, you led yourself here. And now you ask why?" Back at my office, colleagues congratulated me. My request to transfer to a local county assignment had been approved. 2 months earlier, in the aftermath of Ryan's scandal, I had gone to my director and asked for a new environment, a chance to sharpen myself at the grassroots level. I straightened my uniform, my steps steady as I walked the corridor to thank her. Just then, my phone buzzed with a video call. It was my doctor. After my surgery, we had kept in close contact, our professional relationship slowly growing into friendship. I slipped into an empty meeting room and answered. We chatted lightly at first, then she sighed, her face thoughtful. "Rachel, I still remember that day so clearly. One moment you were panicked about your baby, the next you told me calmly to prepare for termination. How did you find the courage for that?" I smiled faintly. "I've always admired my director. She once told me something. I'll never forget, women may seem weak, but once they decide to give up everything, nothing in this world can stop them." As I spoke, I turned and nearly jumped. My director herself was standing in the doorway. I instinctively clenched my hand, tension stiffening my body. She studied me quietly for a moment before stepping inside. "I heard you were looking for me," she said evenly. "I was on my way to find you anyway." I nodded quickly. "Yes, Director. I wanted to thank you for approving my transfer." She was silent for a few seconds, then a rare smile touched her lips. "At first I worried you wouldn't withstand the hardships out there, but now I'm certain you will. Do well these next 2 years, Rachel. When you return, I'll be waiting for your next breakthrough." Emotion swelled in my chest, but I forced it down, offering her a steady smile. "I won't let you down." Life moved forward. Yet outside those walls, Ryan Hale still carried his punishment. The day he was released, Chloe Bennett was waiting for him outside the prison gates. Tears glistened in her eyes as she whispered, "Ryan, I divorced Michael. You've sacrificed so much for me. Let me stay by your side for the rest of my life. I'll take care of you." Ryan froze, staring at her for 2 long seconds. Then suddenly, he turned his body, lurching into motion. He ran with a desperate force, as if chased by demons, as if the very sight of her burned his skin. His shoulders heaved, his strides pounding against the pavement, each step carrying him further away from the woman who thought she had finally won him. And Chloe, left behind with her trembling hands and hollow promises, could only watch his retreating back disappear into the distance. After months of searching, Ryan finally tracked down Rachel's current number. Yes, he wanted her back. Through every day of that long year in prison, not a single moment had passed when he didn't think of her, the woman who had once endured every hardship by his side, who had carried him when he was at his lowest. No one had ever understood him like Rachel. No one had been his anchor the way she had. 10 years earlier, when he had nothing but dreams and empty pockets, she had still chosen him. Now, Though disgraced, stripped of title and pride, Ryan still had his skills, his experience. He believed he could rebuild. With trembling fingers, he dialed her number. On the other end, a loudspeaker blared the background, filled with the bustle of a union competition. The blue team Group 3 eliminated. The red team Group 8 eliminated. Ryan drew in a deep breath, steadying himself. "Rachel, it's me. Ryan, I'm out." There was a pause, then her voice came through sharp, cold, like steel cutting air. "Why are you calling me?" He tightened his grip on the phone, forcing his voice into solemnity. "Rachel, I want to start over. I want to win you back." The line went silent for 2 seconds. Then she laughed, quiet and short, the sound more like dismissal than amusement. Ryan had expected that reaction. He pressed on, undeterred. "I know you can't forgive me yet. That's fine. I'll wait. Life is long, Rachel. I'll rebuild. I'll make it right. I've thought of our child every day this past year. I know how much you've suffered. Let me repay you." Just then, a booming announcement cut across the connection. "Director Scott, please come to the stage to announce the results." Rachel's voice came back clear, crisp, each word precise. "Ryan, that child, I chose to end it. It wasn't taken from me. I let it go." He froze. "Rachel, what? What are you saying?" The sharp rhythm of her heels echoed faintly through the phone as she moved across the stage. "At first, the baby was fine, but the day I lay in that hospital bed, listening to you and Chloe whispering, I decided to end it. When you chose to save her child, you abandoned ours. You let go first. So don't call me again. Don't show up in my life. You've been out of the picture for a long time." The call clicked dead. Ryan sat in the cramped, dim apartment, his phone heavy in his hand, his body frozen like stone. The silence around him pressed in, suffocating. The next 2 years were marked by failure. Every attempt he made at rebuilding crumbled. Each plan dissolved into dust. Eventually, necessity pushed him into delivery work, ferrying packages across the city just to survive. One afternoon, he carried an order up the cracked steps of an old housing block. The door creaked open to reveal Chloe. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her skin blotched with bruises. Behind her, a man's voice bellowed curses, the sound of rage crashing through the thin walls. The scene was painfully familiar. The faces were painfully familiar. Ryan's heart stuttered. He turned quickly, pulling the mask tighter over his face, fleeing down the stairs before she could recognize him. Another 2 years slipped away. By then, ambition no longer stirred in him. The hunger for titles, wealth, success, they meant nothing. He pedaled through the streets with no dreams beyond the next delivery. Money was just survival. Without family, without children. What purpose did fortune serve? It was only then, stripped of everything, that he understood the cruelest truth. His life was already over. Sometimes when the wind rushed past his ears as he rode, Ryan's mind drifted back. He saw again that young man sitting by the artificial lake on campus years ago, penniless, hungry, yet brimming with hope. He saw the future stretched wide before him. He saw the beautiful girl at his side, believing in him with all her heart. That boy had been him. And yet, looking in the mirror now, he realized the boy was gone, long dead. What remained was only a shadow, a shell, a man consumed by his own ruin. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next videos.